Say that I'm going to stop and come over here and give this lecture as if I can have 5 minutes with Siza, because I respect his work so much. And I had a whole hour with him in his office. We had telling the stories. And to my shock, he came to the talk, and that's like a biggest honor. I mean, I think Álvaro Siza is the greatest living architect on the planet. That's my opinion. I believe there needs to be an idea that drives the design. When I had an exhibition at the Architecture Zentrum in Vienna 10 years ago, I said two things: idea and phenomena. So there needs to be an intellectual idea that drives the design, that gives the depth of meaning that you can feel and you can study, and it stays with the building. However, the real test is the phenomena of the body moving through space, the experience of the actual material, the space, the light. So a 5-year-old can understand great architecture. I think unpredictability is at the center of creative work. Play, you know, the idea that you play. When you're trying to create something, you try to bring all the subjective forces into play, and you experiment, and it's a very important dimension. As I said in the talk, I don't work from plans, elevations. I work from spatial perspectives. From an idea that's driving the design, I move into the interiors. I work with light. That's why I work with watercolor washes. I can picture on a 5x7. I can picture how the light's going to come in very quickly. In a few minutes, I can make a feeling of the light and overlapping perspectives through the space. And from those, I make a plan. I don't make the plan first and make perspectives of it. That's what you know, that's what usually architects do, and I don't do that. So it's opposite, the opposite.
Yes.
This was in 1986. I was in the Triennale in Milan, and they asked us to do the Porto Vittoria train station redevelopment. At that time, there was a rationalist movement of architecture. They worked from building typology and urban morphology. It was Emilio Battisti, Leon Creer, Aldo Rossi, many people, the rationalist movement. And I said, wait a minute, I'm going to throw both of those out. I'm going to work from perspective back to space. That's not working from morphology and building. Anyway, I worked with a program I called semi-automatic programming. The project was a seminal project for me. It's in my publications, but that's where it was out of rejection of the current theoretical operative that I came to these other ideas. I've been working since I made the Salk Institute lecture in 2016, and in a certain sense, it's an innocent effort to understand the breakthroughs that are happening in neuroscience, but then to give more validity to the importance of architecture. You know, like Winston Churchill says, first we shape our buildings and then they shape us. That's from 1944. Now we can prove validity in neuroscience of these statements that are older. So that's a little bit, it's more of a desire to give validity to the importance of architecture. It's totally central. Light, space, form, geometry, okay, sound, rhythm, tonality. They're the core elements that we make architectonic space out of. So it's nothing that ever goes away. It's central. It's a central reality, and it's exciting. I was studying Le Corbusier because in my teaching, my professor, Herman Punt, he gave the history of architecture. He says starts with Brunelleschi, modern architecture. With Brunelleschi, then it goes to Schinkel, then it goes to Sullivan, then it goes to Frank Lloyd Wright. And he taught us for a whole year just with these examples. You know, all the work of Schinkel, all the work of Louis Sullivan, all the work of Frank Lloyd Wright. And I graduated, I didn't know who Le Corbusier was. And I got all these books, and I got the modular, number 1 and number 2, and I began to think that proportion was so important. So my first house I tried to do with a red and blue series of proportioning, and then I studied the R.C. Thompson, the growth in form. I studied Malta-Gica, the natural geometries, and I began to read about it. And you know, this joint to that joint to that joint is 1 to 1.618. It's in everything. It's in pine cones. It's in the solar wind. It's a scientific fact. And I started to study, you know, and then I just say that's a basic reality, like something like harmony. Like Bela Bartok composed using this ratio in music, 1 to 1.618. So then it's not something I start a project with. We do a thing called a fine tuner. So after we start to work and we already have a concept and we start to have spaces, then we tune it and we make it, you know, harmonically related. So I've done that since my first house. That's been epiphany for my whole life since I was a student. I mean, maybe the body of light, the change of the seasons, when the rain comes down through the oculus, the little silver raindrops, the floor that's carved, and then with these slots, the Romans understood, they put the drain slots, the fact that the drum itself has been there 2,000 years, and if you look carefully, if you lay your head on the floor of the Pantheon, you will see that it's pushed the outside down. There's a kind of concave aspect that time has brought to this place. Yeah, so I always go back to Rome in a certain sense, and it's amazing, this sort of proportions in the geometry.